Imagine this. You've walked the same land for decades, trusted the same animals with your life, and then one quiet night, fear arrives before you do. What you're about to hear begins with something simple, a horse refusing to move, but ends with a mystery that questions instinct, reality, and what we choose not to see when the dark feels too quiet. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because once this story starts, there's no turning back. The night it happened, everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. The ranch had seen 1,000 nights like this one, calm, wide, and open, with the sky stretched thin above the fields like a faded blanket. John Miller stepped out of his farmhouse just before midnight, boots crunching softly on gravel still warm from the day. The air smelled of dry grass and dust, familiar enough to feel like part of his own skin. He wasn't worried. He never was. This land had been his for 30 years, and nothing here surprised him anymore. At least that's what he believed. The horse waited near the fence, its dark shape barely visible under the weak glow of a single floodlight. Ranger had been with him for 12 years, loyal, steady, predictable. John grabbed the reins with one hand and gave a gentle tug toward the open field. "Come on, boy," he murmured. Ranger didn't move. John frowned. That alone was strange. Ranger followed commands without hesitation, especially at night when routine mattered most. John tugged again, a little firmer this time. The horse's muscles tightened beneath its coat, its ears flattened. Then it took a single step back. That stopped John cold. That's not like you, he thought, irritation mixing with confusion. Horses sensed things, storms, predators, changes in the ground, but this field was empty, had been for weeks. A low, uneasy sound escaped Ranger's throat. Not quite a neigh, more like a warning. John glanced toward the field. Moonlight washed over the grass in pale silver waves. Nothing moved. No coyotes, no rustling, no wind. The silence felt thick, almost heavy, pressing against his ears. "Easy," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "It's just the field." Ranger trembled. John felt a faint chill crawl up his arms. Why now, he wondered. He'd walked this exact path hundreds of times. Night feeding, night grazing. It was routine as breathing. Still, he stepped forward, boots sinking slightly into the dirt as he guided the reins ahead. Ranger refused again, hooves scraping backward, eyes wide and fixed on the darkness beyond the fence. John's grip tightened. "You're spooked by nothing," he told himself. Animals panicked sometimes, it meant nothing. Yet a small unwanted thought surfaced. What if it isn't nothing? He shook it away. "Come on," he insisted, voice sharper now. Ranger let out a sharp, desperate whinny that sliced through the quiet. The sound echoed across the ranch, bouncing off the barn, dissolving into the open land. John froze. He'd never heard that sound from Ranger before. Not during storms, not during predators, not ever. The horse's entire body quivered. Sweat darkened its coat despite the cool night. It pulled hard enough that John nearly lost his footing. A deep unease settled in his chest. "Animals know," his father's voice echoed in his memory. "They feel danger long before we do." John swallowed. He scanned the field again, squinting as if the darkness might suddenly reveal its secret. But the field remained empty, perfectly, unnaturally empty. No insects chirped, no wind whispered through the grass. Silence. John took a step closer to the fence. The ground felt normal beneath his boots, yet something about the space beyond made his skin prickle. He couldn't explain it. There was no smell, no sound, just a sensation, like standing too close to a drop you couldn't see. Ranger yanked back again, harder, nearly tearing the reins from John's hand. "All right," John muttered, heart pounding now. Enough. He exhaled slowly and loosened his grip. Pushing further felt wrong. He didn't like admitting that even to himself, but instinct was clawing its way past logic. John led Ranger back into the corral. The horse followed eagerly now, almost gratefully, pressing close as if seeking shelter. John latched the gate and rested his forehead briefly against Ranger's neck, feeling the animal's racing heart beneath his skin. "What scared you?" he whispered. Ranger only snorted, eyes still locked toward the field. John turned away, trying to convince himself this was nothing more than an animal's nerves. Still, as he walked back toward the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen had been watching, something that had stood in the field while he stood at its edge, unaware. Inside, John poured himself a glass of water, hands slightly unsteady. He stared out the kitchen window at the dark land beyond the fence. The field looked unchanged, ordinary. Yet sleep came slowly, filled with restless thoughts and half-formed worries he refused to name. At dawn, he told himself, he'd check the field. At dawn, he'd prove to himself that fear had no place on his ranch. He didn't know yet that the field would answer him back. Dawn arrived without warmth. Pale light crept over the horizon like it was unsure whether it belonged there. John woke before his alarm, heart already racing, the unease from the night clinging to him like dust. For a moment he lay still, listening. The ranch was quiet, too quiet. He pulled on his boots and jacket and stepped outside. The air felt colder than it should have, sharp against his lungs. No birds sang. That absence struck him immediately. Mornings were never silent out here. John paused on the porch, staring toward the field. It looked the same from a distance. Flat, open, ordinary. Yet something in his chest tightened, as if his body remembered fear his mind hadn't caught up to yet. Get a grip, he told himself. You're letting a horse spook you. He walked toward the corral first. Ranger stood alert, eyes wide, muscles tense. When John approached, the horse huffed softly, pressing closer to the fence. You're all right, John said, though he wasn't sure who he was reassuring. He unlatched the gate and stepped inside. Ranger didn't move toward the field. Instead, he shifted away from it, hooves scraping nervously. John followed the horse's gaze past the fence. The first thing he noticed was the grass. It lay flattened in wide arcs, as if something heavy had pressed it down during the night. Not tire tracks, not footprints he recognized. The patterns were wrong, too smooth in places, sharply indented in others. John swallowed. He stepped through the gate and into the field. The ground felt different beneath his boots, firmer, compacted, like it had been pressed down with deliberate force. He crouched and brushed his hand over the soil. Cold, colder than the surrounding earth. That doesn't make sense, he thought. As he moved farther in, more details emerged. Marks stretched across nearly 40 yards of land, forming a loose oval. Inside it, the grass bent inward, as if pulled toward a center point. John felt his pulse quicken. He straightened and slowly turned in a circle. The silence pressed in again. No insects, no birds. Even the wind seemed reluctant to cross the space. John became acutely aware of his own breathing, loud and intrusive. Then he saw the impressions. They weren't hooves, they weren't boots. Each mark sank several inches deep, yet lacked clear edges, almost melted, as if whatever made them had been impossibly heavy but not solid in the way he understood. A shiver ran through him. This isn't natural, his mind whispered. He backed away slightly, scanning the perimeter. Near the far edge of the oval, something caught the light. John squinted and walked closer. The soil there was scorched, not burned black, not charred, just altered. The dirt had turned a dull grey, cracked in thin lines like dried clay. When John knelt and touched it, he yanked his hand back. Cold, ice cold. What the hell? He murmured. His thoughts raced. A helicopter? No tracks. No sound. Equipment? Who would come out here? Why? None of the answers fit. Logic slid uselessly off the scene in front of him. A sudden realization hit him. Ranger had known. The horse had sensed this place before John ever stepped into it. That thought made his stomach twist. He stood quickly, suddenly feeling exposed, like the field was aware of him now. John hurried back toward the corral. Ranger watched him closely, ears flicking, nostrils flaring. When John reached the fence, he glanced back one last time. For a split second, he thought he saw movement near the center of the oval, a distortion in the air, like heat rising off asphalt. Then it vanished. His breath caught. He didn't wait. He secured Ranger and headed straight for the house, locking the door behind him. Inside, he leaned against the wall, heart pounding, mind spiraling. Someone needs to see this, he thought. Someone official. Yet another thought followed immediately, quieter but heavier. What if they already know? By mid-morning, a truck appeared at the edge of his property, white, unmarked. John watched from the window as it rolled to a stop near the field. Two men stepped out wearing plain jackets, their movements precise and unhurried. John's chest tightened. He hadn't called anyone yet. The men approached the oval, stopping just short of the scorched soil. One of them knelt, examining the ground with practiced efficiency. The other scanned the surroundings, eyes lingering briefly on the farmhouse. On John, their gaze met. The man didn't wave, didn't smile. He simply nodded once, as if confirming something already decided. John stepped back from the window, a cold certainty settling into his bones. Whatever happened in that field last night wasn't over. It had only been discovered. And now, it wasn't just his problem anymore. John watched the men from behind the thin curtain. barely breathing. They moved with the kind of coordination he'd only seen once before, years ago, when federal agents had crossed neighboring land during a wildfire investigation. These men were different. No insignias. No visible equipment beyond small cases clipped to their belts. They didn't get lost, John thought. They came here. The taller one circled the oval slowly, counting steps under his breath. The shorter man knelt again, this time removing a small device from his jacket. It emitted a soft clicking sound, rhythmic and controlled. John didn't recognize it, but the way the man adjusted it told him he knew exactly what he was measuring. A knock shattered the stillness. John flinched. The sound came again, firm, deliberate. He hesitated, every instinct screaming caution. If you don't answer, they'll come in anyway, he realized. That certainty felt heavy, unavoidable. John opened the door. The taller man stood on the porch, face calm, eyes sharp. Mid-40s maybe, clean-shaven, the kind of face that revealed nothing. "Mr. Miller," the man said, not a question. John nodded slowly. "That's me. My name is not important," the man replied. "May we come in?" John considered refusing. The thought lasted less than a second. He stepped aside. Inside, the men glanced around the house with quick efficiency, cataloguing everything. John felt suddenly transparent, as if every choice he'd ever made was laid bare under their scrutiny. "We detected an anomaly at approximately 2:17 a.m., the shorter man said, pulling a tablet from his jacket. "Centered on your southern field." John's throat went dry. "Anomaly?" The taller man met his gaze. "You noticed something unusual this morning." It wasn't phrased as a question, but John answered anyway. "My horse wouldn't enter the field last night. At dawn, I found marks." The men exchanged a look, brief, meaningful. "Did you touch the affected area?" the shorter one asked. "Yes." "Any dizziness? Nausea? Loss of time?" "No," John replied, though the question itself unsettled him. The taller man nodded once. "That's good." John's patience snapped. "Who are you people?" A pause. Calculated. "We represent a joint federal task group," the taller man said carefully. "Our role is to assess and contain events that fall outside standard agricultural or geological explanations." John laughed, sharp and humorless. "That's a hell of a way to say trespassing." The man didn't react. "For your safety, we need to restrict access to that field." "For how long?" "Indefinitely." The word hit harder than John expected. "That's my land. And this is no longer just your concern," the man replied evenly. Something in his tone told John this conversation had boundaries he wasn't allowed to cross. Still, he pushed. "What happened out there?" Another pause, longer this time. "At 2:17 a.m., the shorter man said, multiple satellites registered a localized disruption. Electromagnetic variance spiked by 85% above baseline. Thermal readings dropped sharply. The event lasted exactly 112 seconds. John stared at him. Numbers. Precise. Unarguable. "That doesn't happen from animals," John said quietly. "No," the taller man agreed. "It doesn't." John felt his pulse in his ears. They know more than they're saying, he realized. And worse, this isn't the first time. "What do I do?" John asked. The taller man finally softened, just slightly. "You do nothing. Continue your routine. Avoid the field. Report anything unusual. And my horse?" "Horses are sensitive," the shorter man said. "Your animal reacted appropriately." That sentence echoed in John's mind long after they finished speaking. Outside, the men set up small markers along the perimeter of the oval. Thin metal stakes, each marked with an identical code. John counted 12 of them. The number lodged itself in his thoughts, refusing to leave. By noon, another vehicle arrived. Then another, unmarked, silent. The field transformed into a quiet operation zone, wrapped in professionalism and secrecy. John stood on his porch, watching strangers claim his land inch by inch. This isn't over, he thought. This is the beginning. As the sun climbed higher, a helicopter passed far overhead, too high to hear clearly, but close enough to cast a fleeting shadow across the ranch. John followed it with his eyes until it vanished. When he looked back at the field, one of the men was staring directly at him again. This time the man raised a hand, not in greeting, but in warning. John understood then. Whatever had come to his ranch didn't just leave marks in the soil. It had triggered something far larger, something that had been waiting for confirmation. By sunset, the ranch no longer felt like John's. Yellow warning tape stretched across the southern field, fluttering weakly in the evening breeze. Temporary lights stood on metal tripods, casting harsh white circles over the flattened grass. The soft, familiar darkness John loved had been pushed back, replaced by something clinical and exposed. John sat on the porch, coffee untouched in his hands. He watched the men move with quiet purpose, checking instruments, speaking in low voices he couldn't hear. Every so often one of them glanced toward the house, as if reminding him he was still being observed. My land, he thought bitterly, and I need permission to walk on it. Ranger refused to eat. The horse stood rigid in the corral, head raised, eyes fixed on the lit field. John had tried hay, grain, even an apple. Nothing worked. Each time the lights flared brighter, Ranger's muscles tensed like coiled wire. John felt a familiar pressure behind his eyes. He's afraid because he remembers, he thought, and I don't. As night settled in, the men finished setting up their perimeter. One of them approached the porch. It was the taller one, the man without a name. We'll be here overnight, he said. I recommend you stay inside. John met his gaze. That thing coming back? The man didn't answer immediately. His eyes shifted briefly toward the field, then back. We don't believe it ever fully left. The words sank in slowly like cold water. John exhaled. You said this wasn't the first time. A subtle change crossed the man's face. Not surprise, calculation. Did I? He replied. You talk like you've seen this before. The man hesitated just long enough to confirm John's suspicion. Events like this have occurred in other rural locations. Low population density, limited witnesses. Ranches, John said. Yes. The porch light hummed softly above them. In the distance, one of the instruments emitted a faint chirp, then went silent again. John leaned forward. What happened to those other places? The man looked at him carefully. They adjusted. That answer felt incomplete. Dangerous. Adjusted how? John pressed. The man stepped back slightly. Mr. Miller, the less you know, the easier it will be for you to continue living here. John laughed under his breath. You've already crossed that line. The man studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once. If anything changes tonight, we'll handle it. And if you don't, then you'll want to be far from the windows. The man turned and walked away. John sat alone as darkness deepened. The ranch, once alive with familiar nighttime sounds, felt hollow. No crickets, no owls. Even the cattle in the distance had gone quiet. Inside, John tried to distract himself with the television, but the noise only heightened his unease. Every few minutes he found himself staring at the dark screen, listening instead. What if it's still out there, he thought, watching. Just after 11:40 p.m., the lights in the field flickered. John stood instantly, heart pounding. Outside voices rose, sharp, controlled. One of the men spoke rapidly into a radio. Another adjusted the equipment, fingers flying with practiced urgency. The air felt heavier, pressing down on John's chest. He opened the front door despite the warning, stepping onto the porch. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. His breath fogged in front of his face. A thin layer of frost spread across the porch railing, creeping like living veins. What the hell? John whispered. From the center of the field, a low hum began to rise. Not loud but powerful. It vibrated through the ground, through John's boots, through his bones. Ranger screamed, a raw, terrified sound that sliced through the night. John clutched the railing. His thoughts raced. This is it. This is what he felt. The men shouted now, urgency replacing control. Lights flared brighter, then dimmed. One of the metal stakes vibrated violently, rattling against the soil. At the center of the oval, the air warped. It folded inward, like the surface of water disturbed by something unseen. The grass beneath it flattened completely, pressed down by an invisible force. John's mind struggled to keep up. This isn't possible, he thought. This can't be real. And yet, it was happening. A voice crackled over a loudspeaker. All units, confirm Protocol 12. Protocol. The word echoed in John's head. They expected this. The distortion intensified, growing taller, wider. The hum deepened into something almost rhythmic, intentional. John took an involuntary step back. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The lights stabilized. The hum vanished. The frost melted away, leaving damp wood behind. The field lay still, silent once more. John realized he'd been holding his breath and forced himself to inhale. The men stood frozen, staring at the center of the oval. One of them whispered, barely audible, "It's accelerating." John didn't know what that meant, but he knew with absolute certainty that whatever had come to his ranch was no longer testing the ground. It was testing boundaries. The men didn't leave after the event. They tightened the perimeter. John noticed it immediately. More lights, more equipment, a new tension in the way the team moved, sharper now, less controlled. Whatever had happened moments earlier had crossed a threshold they hadn't expected to reach so soon. The taller man approached the porch again. His calm was thinner this time, stretched tight over something urgent. "Mr. Miller," he said, voice low, "I need you to tell me exactly what you experienced." John stared past him at the field. "I felt the ground vibrate, the air folded. My horse screamed like it was being torn apart." The man nodded slowly. "Did you hear anything else? Voices? Patterns?" "No voices," John replied. But the sound wasn't random. It had rhythm. That answer mattered. John could see it in the man's eyes. Behind them, the shorter man spoke into a secure radio. "Event recurrence confirmed. Timestamp 2:17 ante-meridium initial contact. Second manifestation at 11:40 post-meridium. Duration increasing." John's stomach dropped. They're tracking this like a schedule, he thought, like it's following rules. The taller man turned back to him. "We're escalating this site." "To what?" John asked. "Federal oversight." A new vehicle rolled in through the dirt road, black this time. No plates, no markings. It stopped well short of the field. Two figures stepped out, both wearing long coats despite the mild night air. John felt it then, an instinctive understanding. These ones matter more. One of the newcomers approached the group, speaking quietly but firmly. The others listened. Nobody interrupted. John caught fragments. "By pattern confirmed. Matches Montana site. Protocol 12 no longer sufficient." Montana. John's heart pounded. "Other ranches?" he asked aloud. The taller man hesitated. That was answer enough. "Yes," he said finally. 7 confirmed locations over the last 18 months. "And what happened to them?" John pressed. The man exhaled through his nose. "Land seizure. Long-term monitoring. In 3 cases, permanent evacuation." John felt a cold knot form in his chest. "You're saying I might lose my ranch?" "I'm saying this place may no longer be safe," the man replied. John laughed quietly, a sound without humor. "It was safe yesterday." "Yesterday," the man agreed. It hadn't completed a full cycle. The phrase stuck in John's mind. Completed a cycle. "What cycle?" he asked. The man looked toward the field again, then lowered his voice. "Every event follows a structure. Initial contact, environmental response, biological reaction." "My horse," John said. "Yes." John clenched his jaw. "And then what?" The man hesitated longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Recognition." John felt his skin prickle. "Recognition by who?" The man didn't answer. Instead, one of the black-coated figures approached John directly. A woman this time, older, grey hair pulled tight, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I'm going to ask you something, and your answer matters more than you realize." John met her gaze. "All right. Last night," she continued, "before your horse refused to enter the field, did you notice anything unusual? Lights, sounds, a feeling?" John thought back. The quiet, the pressure, the way the darkness felt heavier. "I felt watched," he said slowly. "But I didn't see anything." The woman nodded. "That's consistent." "With what?" John demanded. She studied him for a long moment, then spoke carefully. "With sites that were marked." The word echoed. "Marked how?" John asked. "Not physically," she replied. "Spatially." John shook his head. "You're going to have to explain that." She glanced at the taller man, who gave a subtle nod. "Certain locations," she said, "act as anchors, points of low resistance. The land doesn't change randomly, it's chosen." John's thoughts raced. "Chosen by what?" "And animals sense it first," she continued. "Then the environment. Then us." John felt a surge of anger cut through his fear. "You're talking like this thing thinks." The woman didn't flinch. "We're talking like the data suggests intention." Silence settled over the porch. A sudden alarm chirped from the field equipment. Sharp, repetitive. The shorter man looked up. Energy levels stabilizing, but not dropping. The woman's expression hardened. "It's not leaving," she said. "It's calibrating." John's pulse roared in his ears. "Calibrating for what?" She looked directly at him. "For contact." The word landed like a blow. Before John could respond, another voice crackled over the radio. "Incoming directive. Effective immediately." Everyone turned. "By order of federal authority," the voice continued. "This site is now classified. Civilian exposure level has exceeded acceptable limits. The woman faced John again. Mr. Miller, you're going to need to make a decision. What decision? He asked. Whether you stay, she said, or whether we remove you. John stared at the field, his field, now glowing under artificial lights, altered forever. If I leave, he thought, I'll never know the truth. And if he stayed? The alarm sounded again, louder this time. The ground trembled beneath their feet, just enough to be undeniable. The woman spoke softly, almost regretfully. It's learning faster than we predicted. John swallowed hard. Whatever had come to his ranch was no longer hiding. It was preparing. John didn't answer right away. The woman waited, unblinking, as if patience itself were a test. Around them, the ranch no longer felt like a place rooted in soil and memory. It felt temporary, conditional, like something already half erased. Removed how? John finally asked. The woman didn't hesitate. Relocation under federal authority, non-disclosure agreements, permanent monitoring. So, John said slowly, I disappear. You're protected, she corrected. John let out a short breath. Protected from the truth, he thought. He looked past her to the field. The equipment hummed softly now, a constant mechanical presence layered over the unnatural silence. The oval of flattened grass seemed darker than before, as if the earth itself had absorbed the night. If I stay, John asked. The woman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then you accept the risk. What kind of risk? She chose her words carefully. Psychological exposure, physiological response, and the possibility that you become relevant. John felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Relevant to what? The taller man stepped closer. We won't force you tonight, he said, but the window is closing. John thought of his father, standing in this same field decades earlier, telling him that land wasn't just something you owned. It was something that remembered you. If I leave now, John thought, this place will remember me as the one who ran. I'm staying, he said. The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then you'll follow our rules. I already am, John replied. She almost smiled. By the time the decision was made official, it was after midnight. The ranch lights burned brighter than ever, casting long, distorted shadows across the ground. Ranger had gone quiet, standing unnaturally still, eyes fixed on the field as if listening to something no one else could hear. John sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a borrowed thermal blanket, watching the operation unfold. His thoughts felt crowded, overlapping, as if his mind were struggling to keep everything in order. This is real, he kept telling himself. Whatever this is, it's real. At exactly 2:30 anti-meridium, the alarms triggered again. This time, there was no hesitation. Energy spike confirmed, the shorter man called out. Matching previous signature. Intensity up 12%. The woman stepped forward. Begin full observation protocol. John stood despite himself. His heart hammered as the air grew dense, pressing against his skin. The hum returned, deeper now, resonating through his chest like a second heartbeat. The center of the oval darkened, not shadow, absence. The grass beneath it flattened completely, pressed so low it looked fused to the earth. The temperature dropped again, frost crawling outward in delicate, fast-moving veins. John's breath caught. This is what Ranger felt, he thought. This is why he refused. The air warped, bending inward, forming a vertical distortion that stretched higher than before. It pulsed once, twice. Each pulse sent a tremor through the ground. Hold positions, the woman commanded. John's thoughts raced. If this thing wanted to hurt us, it already could have, he realized. So why wait? Then it happened. The distortion shifted, not randomly, deliberately. It tilted, subtly, unmistakably, toward the house, toward John. A sharp ringing filled his ears. Images flashed through his mind that weren't memories. Open land under unfamiliar skies, geometric patterns layered over terrain, a sensation of distance collapsing, of somewhere far becoming suddenly close. John staggered, grabbing the porch railing. "John!" someone shouted. He barely heard it. It sees me, he thought, panic and awe colliding. It knows I'm here. The hum intensified, climbing into a frequency that made his teeth ache. The equipment lights flickered wildly. One of the metal stakes snapped free from the soil, clattering to the ground. "Cognitive bleed confirmed," the shorter man yelled. "He's resonating." The woman swore under her breath. "It's not supposed to lock yet." John gasped as the pressure in his head peaked. For a split second he felt something else layered over his awareness. Curiosity. Not human. Not hostile. Focused. Then, Just as suddenly, it released him. The hum dropped away. The distortion contracted sharply, folding inward until it collapsed into nothing. Silence rushed back in, loud in its absence. John dropped to his knees, breathing hard, sweat freezing against his skin. Hands steadied him as the world slowly came back into focus. The woman crouched in front of him. "What did you see?" John swallowed. "Not images," he said hoarsely. "Perspectives." Her eyes widened slightly. "It acknowledged you. That's bad, isn't it?" John asked. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "It means you're no longer just a witness." The words settled over him like a sentence. As dawn approached, pale light creeping over the horizon once more, John realized something had fundamentally changed. The field looked the same, scarred and silent, but the sense of distance he once felt from it was gone. Whatever had come to his ranch had crossed a line, and so had he. The sun rose slowly, hesitant, as if unsure it should witness what had begun on the ranch. John sat on the edge of the porch, wrapped in the thermal blanket, watching dawn spill over the field. The light revealed everything the night had hidden: flattened grass, scorched soil, metal stakes bent at unnatural angles. And yet, the most unsettling change wasn't visible at all. It was inside him. He felt aligned, not calm, not safe, just aware, in a way he had never been before, as if a low-frequency signal hummed beneath his thoughts, quiet but persistent. "It knows me," he thought. The realization no longer caused panic. That frightened him more than fear ever could. Behind him, the operation was already shifting. New personnel arrived before 6 o'clock ante-meridium. Different posture, different authority. A temporary command tent was erected near the tree line. The black-coated woman spoke in hushed tones with two officials John hadn't seen before. One military, one civilian, both carrying themselves like people used to being obeyed. Ranger finally lowered his head to eat. John noticed immediately. The horse chewed slowly, cautiously, but without the rigid terror from before. Its ears flicked toward the field, then relaxed. "They feel it too," the woman said, appearing beside John. He didn't jump this time. "Feel what?" "The stabilization," she replied. "Recognition changes the dynamic." John frowned. "You keep using that word." She watched the field as she spoke. "Because that's what this is. Not an invasion. Not an accident." "Then what?" John asked. "A response." He turned to her. "To what?" She met his gaze. "To us." The words settled heavily between them. By mid-morning, the ranch was officially reclassified. John overheard fragments: non-hostile intelligence, environmental interface, Phase 3 engagement. None of it felt reassuring. A man in a pressed uniform approached him shortly after 9 o'clock ante-meridium. He introduced himself with a name John immediately forgot. "Mr. Miller," the man said, "you've been exposed to a level of interaction we didn't anticipate so early." John crossed his arms. "Seems like you didn't anticipate a lot." The man allowed a thin smile. "That's fair." They walked together toward the edge of the restricted zone. The air felt normal now, warmer. Birds had returned cautiously, their songs thin but real. "What exactly happened last night?" John asked. "Don't sanitize it." The man considered him for a moment. At approximately 2:30 ante-meridium, the anomaly shifted from passive observation to selective engagement. "With me?" "Yes." "Why me?" The man gestured around them. "Because you didn't flee. Because you're anchored here. Because biological proximity matters." "That still doesn't explain it." "No," the man agreed, "but it explains the choice." John felt his jaw tighten. "So now I'm part of this." "You always were," the man replied. "You just didn't know it." They stopped near the center of the oval. The ground still bore the imprint of something heavy, something intentional. John felt the faint hum again, not sound, but pressure, like standing near a transformer. The man continued, voice lower now. "Every confirmed site shares the same variables: rural, stable, long-term human presence, and one individual who remains when advised to leave." John laughed softly. "So curiosity is a liability now?" "Curiosity is a signal," the man said, "and something out there is very good at recognizing signals." A sudden memory surfaced in John's mind. Not an image, but a sensation. Distance collapsing, attention narrowing. It was curious, too, he realized. The woman joined them, her expression unreadable. "We've reviewed the data from last night." "And?" John asked. She hesitated. "The event reached 84% compatibility." The number echoed in his mind. Compatibility with what? "With sustained interaction," she said. John felt a slow chill creep up his spine. "You're saying this isn't over?" "I'm saying it's barely begun," she replied. The decision came shortly after noon. 12 o'clock post, Meridium. Exactly. John was offered relocation again. A house. Compensation. Silence. He declined. The officials didn't argue this time. Instead, they changed their approach. By late afternoon, new equipment arrived, less intrusive, more permanent. Monitoring stations designed to observe, not provoke. The perimeter shifted outward, subtly, as if accommodating an unseen presence rather than containing it. John stood in the field one last time before sunset, accompanied but unrestrained. The air felt expectant. "You're still here." A thought surfaced, not words. Recognition. "Yes," John whispered, unsure why he answered aloud. The pressure eased. Behind him, the woman watched closely. "Did you feel that?" John nodded slowly. "It's not hostile." "No," she agreed. "It's curious." "And that's better?" he asked. She didn't answer. As evening fell, the ranch settled into a strange new equilibrium. The fear was still there, buried deep, but layered with something else. Purpose, maybe, or inevitability. John leaned against the fence, watching Ranger graze calmly for the first time since it began. Animals know, he thought again. As darkness returned, the field remained quiet. No hum, no distortion, just land under stars. But John understood now. The horse hadn't refused the field out of fear alone. It had recognized something before it was ready to be recognized back. And now that recognition had been made, not with humanity, but with him. Night returned to the ranch with unnatural calm. No alarms sounded, no lights flared. The field lay still under the stars, as if nothing extraordinary had ever occurred there. That disturbed John more than the chaos of the previous nights. Silence now felt intentional. John lay awake in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt that faint internal pressure again, the sense of alignment, of attention brushing against his awareness, and then pulling back. "It's waiting," he thought, or listening. At exactly 9:27 post-Meridium, the radios crackled to life. John heard hurried footsteps outside, boots scraping gravel. He sat up instantly, heart pounding. Through the window, he saw lights flick on across the perimeter. Not bright this time, but dim and steady. Observation mode. A knock came at his door. The woman stood outside when he opened it. Her expression was tighter than before. "It's happening again," she said, "but differently." John grabbed his jacket. "You said it was stabilizing." "It was," she replied, "until it wasn't." They walked together toward the field. The air felt neutral, no cold, no pressure, but John felt a subtle pull in his chest, like a compass needle trying to orient itself. "What changed?" he asked. The woman hesitated. "We tried to replicate the pattern." John stopped. "You did what?" She met his gaze. "We introduced a controlled signal, a probe." Understanding hit him instantly. "You poked it?" "Yes." "And?" John pressed. "It responded." They reached the edge of the oval. The grass there had begun to change again, not flattened this time, but standing straighter than the surrounding field, blades unnaturally rigid, as if held in place by invisible tension. One of the technicians spoke quickly into a headset. Signal feedback detected. Phase alignment drifting. Another voice cut in. "Protocol 12 is no longer holding." The phrase sent a cold wave through John. "I thought Protocol 12 was your safety net," he said. "It was," the woman replied, "for observation, not interaction." A low vibration rippled through the ground, not enough to be heard, just felt. John inhaled sharply. "It's closer," he realized, not physically, attentively. At 9:41 post-Meridium, the first failure occurred. One of the monitoring screens went black, not flickered, not powered down, black, as if the data itself had been removed. A second screen followed, then a third. "That's not power loss," a technician said, panic creeping into his voice. "It's selective." John's head throbbed. Images pressed at the edges of his thoughts again. Patterns, distances folding, attention narrowing. "It doesn't like the signal," John said suddenly. Everyone turned to him. The woman stared. "How do you know that?" John swallowed. "Because it feels annoyed." The vibration deepened slightly, like a warning. "Shut it down," she ordered. "Pull the probe." They tried. The equipment didn't respond. At 9:46 post-Meridium, the oval pulsed once. Not visually, cognitively. John staggered, grabbing the fence as his thoughts briefly scattered like leaves in wind. Then something changed. The pressure receded, everywhere except one place. John. He straightened slowly, heart racing. It's isolating me, he realized. Filtering. The woman stepped closer. John, talk to me. What are you feeling? He closed his eyes. Curiosity, not his, layered over it. Evaluation. Their noise, John said softly, nodding toward the equipment. I'm not. The vibration stopped. Complete stillness followed. One by one, the screens powered back on. Data streams returned. The grass relaxed, bending naturally once more. A stunned silence fell over the field. The woman exhaled slowly. It disengaged. John opened his eyes. Because it chose to. The implication hung heavy. A man in uniform approached them, face pale. Ma'am, he said, Protocol 12 has officially failed. She nodded once. I know. John looked at the field, then at her. What now? She hesitated, something like reluctance passing over her features. Now, she said, we stop treating this like a phenomenon and start treating it like what? John asked. She met his gaze. Like a conversation. John felt that internal pressure shift again, not stronger, not weaker, just present. Yes, something seemed to agree. Far off, Ranger lifted his head, ears forward, calm. John understood then. The protocols hadn't failed because they were weak. They had failed because they were never meant to contain, only to delay, and whatever was responding from the field was no longer interested in delay. The field didn't change overnight. That was the first thing John noticed when he woke just after 5:30 ante-meridium. No new marks, no lights, no alarms. The ranch looked almost peaceful in the early morning haze, dew clinging to the grass like nothing had ever disturbed it. And yet everything had changed. John stepped outside, boots sinking softly into damp earth. The air carried the familiar scent of soil and hay, but beneath it lingered something else, metallic, faint, almost electrical, not unpleasant, just present. The perimeter was still there, but looser now, fewer armed personnel, more scientists, more notebooks, less urgency in their movements, replaced by cautious anticipation. They're waiting, John thought, like I am. The woman joined him near the fence line. She hadn't slept, neither had he. We've been reviewing historical data all night, she said. Patterns we ignored before. John kept his eyes on the field. Ignored how? We treated each site as an isolated incident, she replied. Different locations, different variables. And now? And now we see continuity. John felt that internal pressure shift again, subtle but unmistakable. Yes, the sensation seemed to echo. What kind of continuity? He asked. She gestured toward the center of the oval. Geological layers, magnetic fault lines, human settlement timelines. John frowned. You're saying this has something to do with the land itself? Yes, she said, but not just the land. The people who stayed on it. The phrase landed heavily. By mid-morning, excavation equipment arrived. Not large machines, but careful tools, brushes, scanners, precision drills designed to disturb as little as possible. They weren't digging randomly. They were digging exactly where John felt the pressure strongest. At 10:14 ante-meridium, the first anomaly appeared. A scanner emitted a steady tone, rising in pitch. The technician froze. Density change, he said. About 3 meters down. The woman looked at John. You're feeling this too, aren't you? He nodded. Like something humming, waiting to be acknowledged. They began carefully removing soil. The deeper they went, the quieter the field became. Even the birds fell silent again, not from fear but from absence, as if sound itself hesitated near the dig site. John crouched near the edge, watching soil give way to something darker, older, compact. Then metal scraped against stone. Everyone froze. They cleared the remaining dirt by hand. What emerged wasn't machinery. It wasn't debris. It was structure, smooth, geometric, seamless. A surface that reflected no light, yet seemed to hold depth within it, like staring into still water at night. John's breath caught. This has been here the whole time, he realized. Under my feet. The woman whispered, This isn't an impact site. No, John said. It's a foundation. The pressure in his chest intensified, not painfully, but insistently. Images brushed against his thoughts again. Layers of land forming. Time passing not in years, but in shifts, in epochs. Human settlements rising above something already waiting. We built on top of it, he understood. A voice behind them broke the silence. This predates recorded settlement. John turned to see a geologist shaking his head in disbelief. By a lot. How long? The woman asked. He swallowed. At least several thousand years. Possibly more. John felt dizzy. It's been waiting longer than we've been here. At 11:32 ante-meridium, the structure reacted. Not violently. Responsively. The hum returned. Soft, resonant, vibrating through the exposed surface. The sound wasn't audible so much as experiential, settling into John's bones. Others felt it too. He saw it in their expressions. Confusion, awe, fear. Then the pressure narrowed, focused. John stepped forward without thinking. "John," the woman warned. He raised a hand gently. "It's all right." The surface beneath his feet warmed. Not hot, just alive. The hum synchronized with his breathing. "You are here," the sensation conveyed. Not words. Confirmation. "Yes," John whispered. "I am." The field seemed to exhale. Data monitors spiked briefly, then leveled out. The technicians stared, stunned. "It's stabilized," someone murmured. The woman looked at John, eyes wide. "You're acting like a grounding point." He shook his head slowly. "No, I'm a reference." That understanding settled deep inside him. This wasn't about invasion. It was about continuity. About something ancient, embedded beneath human history, finally detecting that the surface had changed enough to respond. "We're loud now," John thought. "We're everywhere." And this place, this ranch, had always been a listening post. As the sun reached its highest point, casting short shadows across the field, John felt the pressure ease into something like equilibrium. The woman stood beside him. "What do you think it wants?" John closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash through him. "Not control," he said. "Not conquest." "Then what?" she asked quietly. He opened his eyes. "Confirmation," he replied, "that we're ready to notice it back." Silence followed, not empty, but full. The structure beneath the soil hummed softly, content, and for the first time since the horse had refused the field, John felt something close to understanding. Whatever had been buried beneath his land wasn't awakening. It had always been awake. It had just been waiting for the right moment to be answered. 6 months later, the ranch still looked like a ranch. That was the lie everyone agreed to maintain. From the road, nothing seemed different. The fences stood straight. The barn doors creaked in the same familiar way. Cattle grazed under wide American skies, and Ranger, older now, slower but calm, moved through the land without fear. But beneath the soil, everything had changed. John stood at the edge of the southern field as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in burnt orange and deep violet. Evening always felt different now, not heavier, not lighter, just attentive. The perimeter had been redesigned. No warning tape, no armed guards, just discreet monitoring stations disguised as irrigation controls and weather sensors. The government no longer spoke of containment, they spoke of stewardship. John remained the constant. Officially, he was classified as a local liaison. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The field responded to him. Not commands, not signals, presence. The woman, now visiting less often, had said it plainly one afternoon. "It doesn't need us," she'd told him. "It tolerates us because of you." John hadn't known whether to feel honored or terrified. The structure beneath the soil no longer reacted violently. No distortions, no frost, no alarms. Instead, it emitted a steady, low-level resonance detectable only by specialized instruments and by John himself, like a heartbeat. Scientists came and went, careful now, respectful. They no longer tried to provoke responses. No probes, no artificial signals. Observation had replaced interference. Protocol 12 had been officially retired. A new framework replaced it. Not a protocol, an agreement. John crouched and pressed his palm to the earth. The ground was warm from the day's sun, solid, real, and beneath that, still here the sensation conveyed. "I know," John murmured. Ranger lifted his head from grazing and looked toward the field, ears relaxed. Animals adapted quickly once fear was no longer necessary. Humans took longer. The official explanation never reached the public. There were rumors, of course, online theories, videos slowed down and enhanced, whispers about government land acquisitions and unexplained sensor arrays, but no one came close to the truth, because the truth wasn't dramatic enough. There had been no invasion, no declaration, no sky filled with lights, just recognition. The structure beneath the ranch wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a vessel. It wasn't even a machine in the way humans defined machines. It was an interface, a boundary marker, something placed long ago when humanity was barely capable of noticing it, designed to wait until the surface reached a certain threshold: population density, electromagnetic noise, planetary alteration, a species becoming loud. The field hadn't activated because of danger. It had activated because of readiness. John had felt that understanding settle into him slowly over weeks, not all at once. The sensation never formed words, but meaning arrived anyway. Clear, undeniable. You are no longer alone in your awareness. That was the message. Not a threat, a fact. As twilight deepened, John noticed the subtle shift in pressure he'd come to recognize. Not urgency, not alarm. Attention. He straightened, heart steady. "All right," he said softly. "I'm listening." The hum beneath the soil adjusted, synchronizing faintly with his breathing. Images surfaced. Not images exactly, but impressions. Time passing in layers. Civilizations rising and falling elsewhere. Other markers. Other watchers. Not all of them active. Not all of them patient. John exhaled slowly. "So, this was just the beginning," he whispered. The sensation didn't deny it. Far from it. The woman had warned him once during her last visit. "This site was never meant to stand alone forever," she'd said. "It's one of many." "And the others?" John had asked. "They're starting to respond too." John looked now across his land, his quiet, ordinary ranch that had become something else entirely. A listening point, a handshake across epochs. The sun finally slipped below the horizon. Stars emerged, sharp and cold, scattered across the sky. John felt the familiar awe he'd known since childhood, now layered with something deeper. They were always watching, he realized, not to judge, to measure. Ranger walked closer, stopping at John's side. The horse nudged him gently, then stood still, facing the field without fear. "Good call, boy," John said quietly. Animals had known first. Humans had nearly missed it. As full darkness settled, the ranch returned to its nightly rhythm. Crickets chirped. A distant owl called. Life continued. But somewhere beneath the soil, ancient systems remained awake. Not invading, not retreating, waiting to see what humanity would do next, now that it had finally noticed it was not alone in its awareness of the world. John turned back toward the house, porch light glowing warmly behind him. Tomorrow would be another normal day, feeding animals, fixing fences, living on land that now carried a responsibility older than history. Before stepping inside, he glanced once more at the field. "We see you now," his thoughts echoed. The response came not as fear, not as warning, but as quiet, undeniable confirmation. And if this story made you wonder what else might be hidden beneath familiar ground, if you felt that chill of recognition just for a moment, then maybe the ranch wasn't the only place listening anymore.